to you. We who believe in freedom and not rest until the giving of life. Of the sun is as important as the giving of white. White mother sun. We who believe in freedom and love. Sing it with me if you like it.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes.
The older I get, the better I know, and the secret of my going on is in the razor in the hands of the young who dare to run against the storm. Cause to me, young people come first. They have the courage where we fail. And if I can but shed some light, I say, carry us through the gate. We who believe in freedom and not rest. Let me talking to you. We who believe in freedom and not rest until you.
Good morning, greetings. That was Bernice Johnson Regan and Sweet Honey in the Rock. My name is Dr. Stephanie Evans, and I'm pleased to be director of the Institute for Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies at Georgia State University, so known as WGSS. Thank you for joining the Gender Studies in Georgia virtual conference hosted by GSU. This Gender Studies in Georgia virtual conference commemorates the 25th anniversary of the Institute for Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies at GSU, the 50th anniversary of women's studies as an academic discipline, and the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. While this event is an occasion to commemorate three very important historical dates relating to WGSS, our larger purpose focuses on the future of our academic discipline and local, regional, and national community building. I'm in the middle of my second year as director, and when I arrived, I asked my colleagues, what are we known for? Who are we, and what do we do? After some engaged discussion, we came up with a basic fundamental description of who we are and what we do. We are a feminist space at Park Place. We recognize that there are many types of feminist and womanist approaches to WGSS. As we're located in 25 Park Place in downtown Atlanta, our suite is a space we use to recognize and organize, recognize each other, organize, create, research, teach, and facilitate critical thinking in feminist traditions. We create feminist space. As we were forced to move into remote space during the pandemic, and as we prepared to keep plans moving for this conference, it became clear that creating feminist space is not confined to one location. Creating feminist space happens whenever and wherever we gather together. As we are gathering in Georgia, I must start by calling the name of Georgia scholar activist Bernice Johnson Regan from Albany, Georgia. Wrote Coalition Politics, Turning the Century in 1981, and it was one of the first readings that I was assigned as an undergraduate WGSS major or interdisciplinary major in my WGSS class at Cal State Long Beach. And in Coalition Politics, Professor Regan talks about home space and coalition space. Home space is where people feel comfortable. You go to feel embraced, to feel affirmed. And coalition space is by its very definition uncomfortable. And it's where tension is part of the process of the work that we have to do. So I've experienced WGSS as both home space and coalition space. And that's what I mean when I say we create feminist space. It is both a place of home and comfort and affirmation, and also one where we are continually challenged to keep growing ourselves. In addition to convening WGSS programs to talk about the issues within the state, This gathering also strengthens relationships with regional, national, and professional organizations. SUSA, the Southeast Women's Studies Association, is the co-sponsor and host of the digital platform. And you see Stacy Keltner, Dr. Keltner there on the screen. This would not have happened without her. We are so, so grateful for the work that you've done. And NWSA, and we are very fortunate to have the incoming president as well as the outgoing president today and tomorrow. And Primala Nadasen is so gracious to join us today to bring welcome to the conference. For this event, we bring together panels of students, faculty, alumni, and community partners from 11 colleges and universities in the state of Georgia. And there are several others who are participating who aren't presenting, so more than a dozen. Public and private, research and teaching focused, HBCUs, predominantly white institutions, and minority serving institutions. At this event, we organize to share information about the work we do, identify our common and unique challenges, and to exchange vital strategies to expand college scholarship, critical thinking, and social justice work. We are fortunate to host 2 plenary sessions, one on Thursday and one on Friday. One will feature authors from the recently published book, Persistence is Resistance, celebrating 50 years of gender, women, and sexuality studies. That's today at noon. And on Friday, we'll feature 3 authors that talk about race, gender, and the vote. And that's tomorrow at noon. Of course, we are thrilled to amplify the voice of a modern-day freedom fighter, Stacey Abrams, whose Fair Fight Action and Fair Count are tirelessly committed to ensuring equal and equitable participation and representation in our democracy. This gathering in this state, in this election year, is pivotal. Accordingly, we have a Georgia Voters Workshop with the state representative of Black Voters Matter. Shout out to Latosha Brown, who is got the blackest bus in America, traversing all over to make sure that voters are registered. To PERB, that organizes for public interest and increased voter rights, and a representative from GSU's own student body advisory board. In addition to screening Suppressed, the documentary on voter suppression. So if you haven't checked out all of the things that we have going on in these 2 days, I know that there's a lot going on. This is not normal. Like, none of this is normal. But frankly, as I was saying backstage, this is the work that keeps me centered. And so while we're all overwhelmed, we all have Zoom fatigue, we're experiencing so much loss and pain and grief and rage, rightful rage. This is a space that we've created that is that space where we get the work done, but that also energizes us. As the leaders of WGSS programs met this semester, and I'm really grateful in the middle of when we were dealing with the pandemic, the department chairs from 14 programs met to plan this conference and to talk about what we wanted to see. And it really was a lifeline. We shared information for strategies that help combat our sense of alienation in this time of distance. I'm also grateful for support for our colleagues and leaders at GSU, including the Center for the Study of Africa and its Diaspora, or CSAD, and the Department of History, which are co-sponsors of this event, and the Office of the Dean and the Office of the Provost. And it means a lot to have the support and encouragement of the Dean and the Provost, who will also bring welcome before the Abrams keynote. Of course, I'm most grateful to the GSU WGSS community. Shout out to help, the help at the help desk, Cam Clayton and Leah Berger-Singer, and to Carolyn Jackson, Trevor Melton, Seth Durgan, Andy Reisinger, Patience Bailey, Victoria Foylan, and the panel at Georgia State, which you have an opportunity to meet later. They all came together to have creative discussions for undergraduate and graduate students. And this is one of the reasons why I was adamant about, even though we've got so much going on, I was very fortunate as an undergraduate to be exposed to the profession. I was a McNair Scholar, and I learned what it meant to do research and to go to panels and to learn how to have these types of dialogues. So even though we have too much going on, it was imperative for me to ensure that the students, undergraduate students and graduate students, have a way of communicating, have a way. And so it was really really an honor to be able to work with SUSA, who's having their conference in the spring, which Stacy will tell you about, and also NWSA. So that's what this community building is about. And so I'm grateful to those who have supported this gathering and committed to our work to hashtag Build a Better World, and to do work that is hashtag always relevant, hashtag still relevant. So over the next 2 days, we have 11 sessions. We have a 10 o'clock session. It's a standard conference. And rather than have a series of Zoom conferences, Stacy had the insight to put us in this hop in. So it operates, as she'll explain, very much like a conference. So we have a 10 o'clock session and a 2 o'clock session on Thursday and Friday, 2 plenaries and a keynote. The Gender Studies in Georgia virtual conference is our way to create hashtag a feminist space to make room for social change in our state, region, and nation. And it is an honor to welcome you to the WGSS community at Georgia State University. So it is my honor now to introduce Stacy Keltner. Stacy Keltner is a first-generation college graduate, professor, and scholar activist from Atlanta, Georgia. She is currently president of the Southeastern Women's Studies Association and director of the master's program in American Studies at Kennesaw State University. Stacy has published widely in social and feminist theory and is the author of Kristeva, Threshold, and co-editor of Psychoanalysis, Aesthetics, and Politics in the Work of Julia Kristeva, and editor of the forthcoming Love and Sex, a primer, a collection of foundational essays on the study of love and sex, from Lord to Butler to Spillers, Hooks, and Fausto Sterling, due out in paperback next summer. Stacy is currently engaged in public scholarship project focused on activism, which initially began as a series of mini lectures and an activist work in her classroom. In 2012, she launched Feminist Activism 101, a toolbox for agitators, a database in the form of resource blog that presented activist work and conceptual frameworks to help students develop their own engagement projects. And you can find out more about her work at Kennesaw. I'll also introduce at this time Primala Nadasen, who is the NWSA outgoing president, and she'll speak directly after Stacy. Primala Nadasen was born in South Africa and raised in the United States, is a professor of history at Barnard College and Columbia University. She is most interested in visions of social change and the ways in which poor and working class women of color have fought for social justice. She has published extensively in the multiple meanings of feminism, alternative labor movements, and grassroots and community organizing. Nadasen has been engaged with community and campus activism for many years and has built bridges between those inside and outside of the academy. She's author of the 2 award-winning books, Welfare Warriors, The Welfare Rights Movement in the United States, and Household Workers Unite, The Untold Story of African-American Women Who Built a Movement, and is currently writing a biography of South African singer, I'm so excited, South African singer and anti-apartheid activist Miriam Makeba. So now we will hear from Stacy Keltner and then Primala Nadasen.
Hello, thank you so much for coming. I'm just delighted you're here, and thank you for participating in this virtual experiment. I keep calling it an experiment. It's not an event yet for me, not in my head. But thank you especially to all of our speakers for working so hard the past few days to make sure that the technology works and that it's doing what we want it to do. Even though it's happening, I still don't believe it. It's like magic to me, like the fact that this is live. Even though I've been working on the technology, there's no connection in my head between the working on the technology and the event actually happening. So it's a delightful miracle, I'll say. So I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I do want to say a special thank you to Stephanie. I can't tell you all how much I have loved working with her over the past few months. Most of you are acquainted with her attentive and creative spirit through her scholarly work. And you can check out her latest preview video essay in our expo, Black Women's Yoga History, Memoirs of Inner Peace. There. But I've also had the privilege to witness and benefit from Stephanie's energy firsthand. and not just through reading her. She is absolutely one of the most supportive, caring, thoughtful, and generous colleagues I've ever met. And don't believe for a second that this conference wouldn't have happened without me, because I assure you it would have, and it would be fabulous. So I'm glad to say this publicly. Stephanie, thank you. I also want to thank our first speaker, Premila Nadasen, president of NWSA, for joining us, and Kay for coming tomorrow. I'm so happy to make these connections between SUSA, NWSA, and Georgia programs in my home state. I actually got involved in SUSA several years ago during Gamergate, when MRAs were targeting our campus. And a lot of my colleagues have been targeted by MRAs, white supremacists, anti-trans activists. And I wanted to bring SUSA to Kennesaw to start building connections and a network of scholars and activists to not only counter the alienating and terrifying effects of that kind of targeting, but to build connections and movement larger than those seeking to undermine our work. So having these organizations and programs and scholar activists all together in a pandemic, no less, is truly amazing. And I hope that we can replicate this in other states. So you know, if you're from out of state and you want to do something like this in your state, I hope you'll come to the SUSA State Connections reception this evening to talk more about it. Quickly to tell you, we have our SUSA CFP is in the expo area. We have a small booth in there that will give you a link to the CFP. It's Precarious Times, Embodying Disobedience, Crafting Affinities. And the submissions are due November 15th. And we've also launched a community survey for the whole region in order to get your feedback on what you think the concept, mission, and strategic plan of SUSA should be, and how we can better support our constituents in our movement building. Just a quick note about the platform. If you've just gotten here and you've made it to the stage, then you have accomplished a big feat. And if you haven't read the tutorial yet, there is, I know we don't like to read directions, but there is a tutorial that's posted. It's a Google Doc and it's posted in the chat under events. It's maybe 3 to 4 pages long, and it will just acclimate you to the space. Over on the left-hand side, you see we have different rooms. We have a stage, we have sessions, we have an expo. On the right-hand side, you can connect with your colleagues. And from the reception area, if you scroll down, you can see the schedule. And everything that is live or about to be live will be in that room when the time comes. We also have a great help desk that is being staffed by 2 Georgia State students. And thank you so much to them for joining us and taking this on literally last minute. So we met yesterday to discuss the help desk. So please be kind to them. They're there to help. And with that, I will hand it over to Premila. Thank you.
So thank you all so much for inviting me to give greetings to this conference. And I want to also give a shout out to Stacy and Stephanie for all of your work in putting this conference together. And as I was mentioning backstage, you know, at a moment when, you know, we're all feeling a tremendous amount of pressure and things feel especially difficult right now. So thank you both for your work, for your intellectual vision, and for sharing your spirit with us, because I'm feeling that spirit coming through. And I think it's heartening at this moment to be in community with both of you and with all of the other participants at this conference. So I'm honored to be here. I want to begin by just saying a few words about why I think women, gender, and sexuality studies is so important at this moment. NWSA recently produced a report on the pandemic and its impact on programs around the country. And one of the takeaways was the WGSS programs and women and BIPOC faculty and staff are disproportionately bearing the brunt of both the health and the economic crisis. These communities, of course, are more likely to serve as frontline workers, more likely to bear the burden of care work, more likely to be in precarious employment positions. And as colleges and universities have begun instituting austerity measures, the WGSS programs and other similar programs have been hardest hit. And this is in part because we are a scholarly field that is committed to equity, justice, and social transformation. So we have offered particular insight into power relations. We have critiqued structural inequalities. And in that way, we've really posed a threat to the status quo. So in many instances, we've seen how universities were simply poised. We're poised and ready to use the austerity as a kind of veneer to begin to target and direct cuts at the WGSS programs. We know that our analysis, our intellectual contributions are even more crucial at this juncture when Black and Brown communities are being victimized by unchecked both state and non-state white supremacist violence, when millions of Americans are experiencing unemployment and food and housing insecurity, and the democratic processes are quickly being eroded before our very eyes. So it's a politically challenging moment. One, as a historian, when I'm in moments like this, I often want to turn to inspiring examples of women who, despite the odds, made a difference, who made their mark on history. And one of those women who I want to uplift today is Dorothy Bolden, who was the founder of the National Domestic Workers Union of America in 1968. Dorothy Bolden was an Atlanta resident. She began working as a domestic at the age of 9. And became involved in the civil rights movement in the early 60s, especially around the effort to desegregate the public schools in Atlanta. Bolden, as a domestic worker, experienced many of the hardships of the occupation. So she talked about pan-toting, for example, of having to take hand-me-downs in lieu of payment from her employers. She recalled being arrested for refusing to wash dishes when a white employer demanded that she not leave until she finished washing the dishes. Bolden went on to organize one of the largest and the most influential domestic worker rights organizations in the country, based in Atlanta. She rode the city bus lines, she handed out leaflets, she worked to establish a citywide minimum wage. And so, despite the claims that this occupation was unorganizable, she did so despite meager resources. She saw herself and other activists like Fannie Lou Hamer and Rosa Parks as critical to the success of the Black freedom movement. These were, as she explained it, strong women that didn't back down. And today, of course, we have our own strong women that don't back down. And this conference program, I think, is highlighting many of those women. It's a conference about women's voice, about women's vote, and women's power. Women who are offering a vision necessary to both expose and to transform. People like Dr. Beverly Guy Sheftall, who for decades has served as a model of Black feminist theory and activism, really does embody persistence is resistance. And Stacey Abrams, of course, who is an incredible and passionate voice for change. But alongside these big names and these well-known names, I was very pleased to see there are students and activists who are also deeply engaged in the ways in which, in helping us think through how we understand feminism at this moment and how we understand social change. So I think the conference program really does represent a diversity of feminist voices. In this election year, the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, the ongoing inequities and access to the ballot have become abundantly clear. There's so much at stake on the cusp of this election. It is truly a watershed moment in history, and I think that's very clear to all of us. And so the question is, I think, whose voice will be heard now? And I think the answer that we're starting to see from this conference program as it is emerging is that we each have to make our own voices heard. But I think more than that, we have to build community, because it's not just about individual voices. It's about what we as a community, as a feminist community, as an intellectual community, as a political community, how we could make a difference. So with that, I just want to wish all of you a wonderful and generative conference. And once again, thanks so much to the organizers.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Very much like Stacey, I'm like, wow, I can't believe this is actually happening. I tell my students sometimes I operate by the spaghetti method. which is, I have accomplished quite a bit that you see, in my work. But what you don't see is all the mess on the floor. So I literally just like throw ideas against the wall, and whatever sticks, that's what I claim. So I was very pleased to be in the company of people when I came to Georgia State, the dean, the provost, and definitely my colleagues, when I said, hey, why don't we gather in the state and have a discussion about where we are. And we're having some internal discussions about, we were having these discussions anyway, but then with the pandemic, with the resistance to white supremacy and people in the streets, Black Lives Matter movement, it was ever present, like, yes, this is an idea that we should pursue, especially because we're all under duress, and that this was a space that we all needed to create. And so this was an idea that I threw against the wall, and it worked. So with that, I will invite the conference attendees to join us in the sessions. And again, this idea of critical thinking, we say this is one of our mandates, what we are called to do, to educate. And I don't know where I would be or what I would think without African American studies, without women's studies. And, both of these are my degree areas. And someone told me, like, you can't get a job these are your degrees. What can you do with a degree in women's studies? What can you do with a degree in Black studies? It is that work where we teach critical thinking in a moment when, a historical moment, when it is, in fact, revolutionary to think critically. If we think about knowledge, comprehension, analysis, application, synthesis, evaluation, those things that you see on the syllabus that we kind of just skip over, and we say in general education, we're teaching critical thinking. Something so basic as knowledge, like what is a fact? What is accepted as fact right now is under attack. And so it's a pleasure to be in the company of people who are doing this work that gives us life, that makes me feel connected to those who have come before, and makes me feel like I'm doing something useful. So spend some time with us, share some space with us, and we will see you in the sessions and then back together here for the plenary on Persistence is Resistance. Thank you, Professor Nadesan. Thank you, Stacy. And we'll see you in the sessions.
This just in, I'm a talented young Black man in Georgia, sitting on his couch in the street. Every time I turn on the news, I can't seem to tell a lie from the truth. Earthquakes all over the place, contaminated water in Flint is so crazy. Big pharma making big gold bugs, selling all these deadly and addictive drugs. We don't even know what we can eat. We got genetically modified broccoli, and they cloning animals, we eating the meat. The next thing they turn around, they cloning you and me. The way they do the human race is a ridiculous crime. They Colin Kaepernick's we got y'all losing your minds. Come on.
All right. Good morning. Take me off this roller coaster. India Ari, not from Atlanta, but planted in Atlanta like myself. Good morning and welcome to Day 2 of the Gender Studies in Georgia Conference. My name is Dr. Stephanie Evans, and I'm very pleased to be the head of Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies, or WGSS, the institute at Georgia State University. So we are here for the second day to commemorate the 25th anniversary of our institute, the 50th anniversary of Women's Studies as a discipline, and the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. And if you were so fortunate enough to join us yesterday, we had an amazing keynote speech, Stacey Abrams, and it was really, it was my first time listening to her at length. I've listened to her quite a few times, but usually in sound bites, and so it was really refreshing to have that moment of grace to listen to her and have her unpack a lot of the things that we're experiencing and going through, particularly around voter suppression. So while we're here to talk about the history and historical moments, we're also here to build the future. And so at WGSS and at GSU, we call ourselves a feminist space at Park Place. And as I said yesterday, we were forced to go online because of the pandemic. And so now we've begun to create a feminist space online, right? A feminist space wherever we go. So this gathering, this features 11 colleges and universities in the state of Georgia. And there are several more who aren't presenting on panels, but who are, attending and involved. And so the leadership of WGSS met this summer, 14 department chairs in the middle of a pandemic, trying to figure out how we come together and create community in these very trying times. These were HBCUs and PWIs and minority serving institutions, private, public, all in the state of Georgia. And so now we get to talk about where we are and what our work means. Yesterday, we had a plenary Persistence is Resistance, celebrating 50 years of gender with Julie Shane, Judy Howard, and of course, the fabulous Beverly Guy Sheftall from Spelman College. And that too was very insightful. Judy Howard in particular talked about how to create feminist space in administration. And that was, as this is my 11th year as department chair, that was very helpful to, her chapter in the book, Persistence is Resistance, is very helpful to think about how we institutionalize feminist space. Because as we know, representation is important, but it's not everything, right? And so just because you have a woman in a role doesn't mean that you have a feminist or a person who will institutionalize or instill feminist values in the work. And so that's what we're here to do. I would like to definitely thank the Center for the Study of Africa and its Diaspora, or CSAD, at GSU, and the Department of History, who are co-sponsors of this event. And just to remind us that we are here for the entire day. We've got 10 o'clock, we have sessions. 2 o'clock, we have the plenary, Race, Gender, and the Vote, which is going to be incredible, with Carol Anderson, Michelle Duster, who's the great-granddaughter of Ida B. Wells, and the incomparable Martha S. Jones, who just came out with Vanguard, who's helping us understand this historical moment. So definitely don't miss the plenary session at 12 noon. We have another set of sessions, and then we're also screening this afternoon Suppressed, which is a documentary about voter suppression. And then we have a Voting in Georgia, Georgia Voters Workshop. And we have representative from Black Voters Matter, from PIRG, and a student representative from Georgia State University, all talking about the vote. And then at the end, we'll have a reception, and you definitely want to join Stacy Keltner and I at that reception. If you're an undergraduate student, there's a room for you. If you're graduate students, there's a room where you can commune with, all of your comrades from around the state and around the nation. There's a faculty room, and there's also a community organizers, community agency room. So that's what we have lined up for today. I do, again, want to take this moment before I introduce Today with Dr. K. I want to say thank you so much to Stacy Keltner, who really stepped up. We had planned this, obviously, this gathering before the pandemic, the shutdown. And, she reached out to me. She says, we can make this happen because SUSA, the Southeastern Women's Studies Association, was forced to cancel their conference as well. And so she came up, she found this whole hop-in platform that allows us to really have a virtual conference that was built for a virtual conference. And I really want to say thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Dr. Keltner. Thank you, SUSA, for really making this happen and making it all come together. And we are also very, very pleased and grateful for partnership with NWSA, our professional organization, National Women's Studies Association. Yesterday, we had the outgoing president, Pramila Nadasen, really bring us into the conference with with a sense of presence, like where we are and what we're here to do. And today we have Dr. Kay Wise Whitehead, the incoming NWSA president. Dr. Kay Wise Whitehead is a 3-time New York Emmy-nominated documentary filmmaker, as well as a founding executive director of the Emily Francis Davis Center for Education, Research, and Culture, and a K-12 master teacher of African American history. Dr. Whitehead has received various fellowships and grants, including 2012 Gilder Lehrman Fellowship in American History and 2010 NEH Summer Stipend. She's also the 2006 recipient of the Gilder Lehrman Preserve American Maryland History Teacher of the Year Award. At Loyola, she teaches communication and African American studies, and her scholarship examines the ways race, class, and gender coalesce in American classrooms, as well as in political and social environments. Dr. Whitehead has served as a historical consultant for a series of documentaries in Philadelphia and has worked with over 1,000 K-12 teachers to train them in how to become culturally responsive teachers in diverse environments. She is also the host of Today with Dr. Kay, and it is my absolute pleasure to turn the floor over to Dr. Kay Wise Whitehead.
Thank you so much. I am delighted to be here. I watched Premila yesterday bring us into the conference, and I was so overwhelmed to think that I would be stepping into the shoes that have been filled by her, by Beverly Gash-Eftal, by Barbara Ramsby, by Tricia Lynn, to assume the presidency of the National Women's Studies Association at one of the most critical times in our history. When we think about how important this moment is, I've been doing a lot of reflection, thinking about elections, thinking about the importance of the moment, thinking about what it means to be a woman at this moment, what it means to be a gendered person at this moment, what does it mean to be a binary person at this moment? Like, what does it mean to be a human being in America at this moment under this particular administration? I was thinking there are only a few times in history where we've had elections that have been as critical. I think of George Washington when he first took the helm in the country. I think of Abraham Lincoln taking us through the Civil War. I think of FDR and his work that he did taking us through the war, the fireside chats, making us feel that, he heard us and understood us. And then I think of today. We are at the most critical time in our history in this country, where we have to think about standing in our power. I'm so happy that Stacey Abrams spoke last night about the importance of the vote, because that is all that I am focusing on. What can we do, and how can we use our voice in this moment? As we stand here and we think about the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, what I was thinking about for 2020 was it is also the 150th anniversary of the 15th Amendment, when Black men received the right to vote. I think about the fact that this is the 55th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 for Black women, for Asian American women, for Hispanic women, for Indigenous women. We don't really celebrate the 19th Amendment. That's not when our vote was protected, when we can march with courage and confidence to the polls. It was with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So I think we should celebrate that alongside the 19th Amendment. It's also, which I think is critically as important but not talked about enough, is the 7th anniversary of the Shelby County v. Holder case from the United States Supreme Court. That is a pivotal and crucial case where the Supreme Court, with Ruth Bader Ginsburg there, gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which is a direct line between how we move from there to here. Why are people standing in line today? Why do you see the amount of voter suppression and voter intimidation? It's because they gutted that Pre-Clearance Act. That Pre-Clearance Act was set up for states that had already been involved in racist practices towards voting to not be able to make changes unless they got approval from the Department of Justice. When you gut that, then you have South Carolina looking for people to bring a witness to come to vote. And you have Texas where you have to look for a notary. You have all of this happening today because of that gutting of the case in 2013. Understanding that all these are critical moments. We also stand here at this moment today when the latest polls and research has shown 865,000 women have left the workforce due to COVID-19. that in heterosexual households, where men outpace women when it comes to the amount of money they bring into the home, women were the ones who came home to try to juggle schedules for all of our children, came home to try to fill in that gap. And given the fact that white women make 80 cents on the dollar and African-American women make 65 cents on the dollar, and you have Native American women making 58 cents on the dollar, that when you start thinking about that and the long-term impact of that, you begin to recognize and realize that we are at a critical moment. I've been thinking, what can NWSA do along with gender studies programs around the country? How do we compose ourselves and go forward to fight after this critical election? If Joe Biden and Kamala Harris do what many of us are praying that they do, which is bring home the victory, then I think our work begins again to make sure that we hold this administration's feet to the fire, to make sure we do the critical work to get Joe Biden to release a new executive order that can then step in the space that Donald Trump's executive order, where he attacked critical race theory and women's studies programs. We have to get that removed. And it's going to take an executive order from Joe Biden to then stand in that place. And if by chance Donald Trump marches on to victory in this country, then I think that we have to seriously consider how we're going to fight. What does it mean to fight? And what we're willing to risk to save this country. I argue, and I seriously believe in the depths of my heart, that what is on the ballot this year is not about Biden or Trump. It's about the heart and soul and the future of this country. It's about the type of country we want to leave the children of our children. I am no longer tolerant of people who say that they're not going to vote, or they're, I think I've talked to people on my radio show and they're like, oh, I'm writing in my mom. I'm writing in Jesus Christ, or my governor here in Maryland who wrote in Ronald Reagan, none of whom are running for president this year. So when you cast your vote and you say, well, I'm doing this because it makes me feel good, I get that. But we're talking about something bigger than your individual feelings. We're talking about what is happening in this country and how every single policy that we're now struggling with, every single thing that we see being rolled back, every single issue that we are thinking about at this moment as we stand against white supremacy in this country is connected to who occupies those main seats. I think of the fact that Senator Rand Paul, said that he wants them to go back and reconsider what happened with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Like, he's questioning legitimacy of that. Understanding that today, what stands between Black people getting on the front of the bus and getting on the back of the bus is the Civil Rights Act of 1964. What happens with Title IX is connected to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. When this right-leaning court particularly takes place on Monday, if Amy Coney Barrett does does move into becoming the next Supreme Court justice, then the question is, what do we do? How do we stay awake and try to watch both the executive branch and the judicial branch and the legislative branch and still have some semblance of life, of hope, of happiness? I've never been so focused on the executive branch at any other time in my life. I am so concentrated on Donald Trump that sometimes I miss that he put forth 218 judges. 85% of them are overwhelmingly white and male. Sometimes I miss the fact that he put in 53 appeals court judges, which are essentially the regional gatekeepers. Since every court case does not make it to the Supreme Court, it is that appeals court level that sets the precedent for that region. Sometimes we don't think about the fact that Donald Trump put in very few women, very few people of color to act as judges in lifetime appointments. To think about what that means, even as the presidency change, and it's going to change eventually, we're going to have changes happening. It is a setting of the law and precedents taking place within that judicial branch that we struggle with, that we have the long-term impact from. And so these are issues that keep me up at night. And I think that it is part of the work that we do. We are in a contentious area of study, talking about race, talking about gender, talking about class. These are not issues that people want to struggle with. We're still talking about how there's equality in this country and that maybe we're post-racial. I'm like, neither of which are true. We are struggling with just trying to be heard. We're struggling with trying to be seen. We're struggling with getting our work done. We're trying to balance work and life. And we're trying to figure out how to do all of that in these spaces that we occupy. I mean, we stand here on ground that's been taken away from Indigenous people, and we're trying to do good scholarship in those places. We stand in departments where we are sometimes the only Black person in our departments, and we're fighting to be heard and to be seen. I've been at Loyola University for 11 years. I came in as the first Black person and the first woman of color in my department. I stand here 11 years later as the only Black person in my department, fighting every time we deal with hiring, fighting with that one essential, very racist statement. Well, they don't seem to fit with us. Well, then what does that mean? Because if you look around the table, what you're saying is you really want another white person because that feels comfortable for you. And that fits. So we fight on every battlefield. What I'm grateful for is I'm grateful for the National Women's Studies Association, being a fence, being a guard, being a safe space. I'm grateful for gender studies programs across the country to be a safe space, to hear us speak, to protect us and lift us up and to support us. I think that what is interesting, and I'm using the words of Leonard Pitts, who's a Pulitzer Prize winning columnist. Leonard Pitts came on my radio show earlier this week, and he was talking about the Black community. And I stayed up every night ruminating on what he said. He said, in the Black community, we are the most patriotic group in America because we love a country that does not love us back. We defend a country that does not defend us. We fight for a country that does not fight for us. That we cannot be more patriotic than what we are at this moment. I thought about that in terms of being a woman in America as well. Like, what does it mean, Kimberly Crenshaw, with intersectionality, to be a woman in a country where you love a country that does not love you back? You fight for a country that does not fight for you. You defend a country that does not defend you. You speak up in a country that feels comfortable passing laws about your body and will defend and argue and die for your right not to make choices. And yet here we stand. This is the ground that we have been given. This is the space that we are occupying. This is the moment that we're in. I'm a pastor's daughter. And so many times when I think about where I can find strength, I look to the word. So I have to pull in an example because I was talking to my father and I get tired. I think we all do. And I called my dad. I think I was crying about something. I don't know. Maybe they didn't get my Starbucks order right or something. Something silly was like getting me down. And I felt so overwhelmed. It's like one more thing, right? I'm fighting in my department. I'm fighting with my children. I'm trying to get them educated. And then you don't get my order right. Right? So like that was the thing for me. But my dad said, and he used the book of Esther. He talked about for such a time as this. He said, I want you to think for a moment that we are in a contentious time in American history, but you are here. We're at a time when Black people are fighting to speak, but you are here. We're at a time in the midst of a global pandemic where the Black community and the brown community is being disproportionately infected. We are dying of COVID-19, but you are here. Perhaps you're needed at this moment. Perhaps when given a choice, you chose to come back at this moment because you have something that the world needs at this moment. And so no matter what else is happening, whether they get your order right or not, whether they see you or not, whether they hear you or not, you are here at this moment because you have something to give to this world to leave it better than how you found it. And so thank you so much for inviting me to speak. I invite you to join us at the NWSA. We are going to be very active next year. We're going to have a virtual conference. I am looking at Hop In now. My eyes are on you, Stacy, to see how we can do this. But we'll be holding monthly conversations through NWSA. And so just check our website. Join us to do the good work so that we can help to shape a world where our children and their children can be safe, they can be free, and they can fulfill their highest dreams. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Today with Dr. K. That is a word. WPK. That is the word that we needed today. And yesterday I referenced Bernice Johnson Reagan and started the conference with her voice and the concept of coalition politics. And we have to, I feel you on that. I'm the only Black woman department chair. And, at a minority serving institution, and, just all of the intersections, the different sites are always trying, especially in these times. But I do think that with women's gender and sexuality studies, as with African American studies, my other academic home, that we have to push harder to create that safe space, because Bernice Johnson Reagan talks about home space and coalition space, the home space where it's comfortable and the coalition space where the work gets done and it's not as comfortable. And I know that we need to do more in WGSS, as has been said by Barbara Ransby at Beverly Guy Cheftal before, that, NWSA as a space, WGSS programs as a space, still has so much work to do to be that safe space for everyone, including women of color, Black women, trans, definitely. That's one thing that we have identified, as something that we need to do. Shout out to Tiffany King from our department, who is looking around and saying, what are we doing to support our trans students? And not just, okay, here's an article and it's like, no, how are we going to push the administration to understand that we need a faculty member, we need a transgender scholar at Georgia State University? That's the first thing on our agenda, because we're there 3 white faculty, 3 Black faculty. We have parity in a way that many departments don't, but we don't have a transgender faculty member. So we're not there. We have to push and make ourselves more uncomfortable. And this is something that we continue to do and continue to do in individual departments and with regional and national partnerships. And I cannot tell you how grateful I am that you are at the helm and that we are ready to do this work. And definitely holler at Stacy, because she set this whole thing up. There are co-sponsors and partners, like, oh, we're partners, right? And then there are partners where, like, she's anticipating things and setting things up. So yes. So grateful for you, for your presence, for your voice, and for your puppy. Because I love your Bella. I'm telling you what, there's a lot of people, like, I don't have children, I don't have pets. I'm like, so I just live vicariously through you. And Bella is just growing up. She's getting so big. She's going to be asking for the car keys in a minute. So I love that you share your life with us. It's such a gift. You are such a gift. And we're so blessed to have you at the helm, and we got your back. So now I will invite Stacy. Is there anything I'm missing? Is there anything we need? Okay. So now we invite you to hop in to the sessions. And let's see. Up next we have Mercer University, Perimeter College, and Georgia Southern University at 10 o'clock. Again, we'll come back to the stage at noon for the amazing Race, Gender, and the Vote plenary. And then in the afternoon, we'll have Emory University, Agnes Scott College, and my old stomping ground, Clark Atlanta University. And then we'll continue on the program from there. So we thank you so much for joining us for day 2. And again, thank you, Dr. K, and we will see you soon.
Thank you so much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.